and their knowledge and skills are defined by grade level and at the high school at grade span. They're created to be clear and concise, aligned to college and workplace expectations, research and evidence-based, internationally benchmarked, and they truly integrate 21st century skills into the Common Core. But the people that worked on Common Core originally looked at all of the other high-performing countries that are out there, and they looked at, what is it that they're doing? Why are they performing so high? How do they continue to perform highly with their kids? And they took those concepts and integrated them into the Common Core. For our students today, 21st century skills are essential. So with Common Core, they really truly have them embedded in. And our students today need to be ready to compete in the global market. And some of the skills, the 4 C's that they talk about all the time: communication, collaboration, creativity, problem solving, collaboration. Those are the skills that are part of the standards that are with Common Core. And learning really becomes relevant to real life. So our students are able to take what they're learning in school, the content, what they can demonstrate, and really apply it to real life. What they're learning in math, now they're learning not only the problem and how to solve it with the equation, but what does that mean? So, can I take that math and can I go, figure out what the scale of the roof is and create, construction and things like that. Partnership for 21st Century Skills is a website that we use very often. We also have a 21st Century Skills committee that's together, and it really integrates nicely together. But this is a nice visual. The back rainbow part is really the outcomes that we're looking for, and the bottom, the learning environments, the professional development, the curriculum and instruction, the standards and assessment. The standards and assessment is where you'd see the Common Core is really the base and the foundation, what we build upon, and the outcomes are students with a good solid knowledge in the core with life and career skills. Those 4 C's that we talked about: information, media, and technology skills. Common Core is really just one small part of what we do in educating our students. It's sort of the middle, and everything spirals off of it. It's the core nut that we're going to ensure that every student has those skills, knowledge, and what they're able to demonstrate. And then we add in, the instructional strategies, the technology, the grade span, the grade level, the curriculum, the assessments. And so it's all together. So Common Core is really just a piece of what we're doing with kids, but a very important piece. Common Core is not curriculum, and I know this is hard. It's even hard for us educators to grasp sometimes. It's not the curriculum, it's just the standards. The curriculum, the instruction, and the assessments, and the resources, we use all those things to reach the standards. And the curriculum, the Common Core standards really drive the instruction. They say, okay, we're going to reach this standard. How are we going to get there? It's the curriculum, it's the instruction, it's the resources, it's the teaching strategies. And Common Core, as you saw on the previous slide, isn't the be-all and the end-all. It's only one piece, and we add everything around it. And we've had to add more curriculum, we've had to adjust curriculum. As we looked SAU-wide, we look at the GLEs and the GSEs, the grade span expectations, the grade level expectations. We look at Common Core, where does it integrate, where does it fit in, decide what do we have to move. We might have moved some, things we used to do in 3rd grade down to 2nd grade or 4th grade into 5th grade, and adjusted what we do in order to meld in with Common Core. Okay, this is, I was reading a lot about this, so this might help you to figure out the difference between curriculum and standards. So if you're playing baseball, I figure everybody knows baseball because even I do. So, 3 bases, pitcher's mound, the number of feet from the mound to the plate, the number of feet between the bases thing. Those are the standards. That's everybody that plays baseball, high school baseball, that's what you have. You can't change it, you can't make those bases shorter, you can't make the outfield bigger. Everybody plays by those rules. You go past home plate, you get a run. Those are the standards. The coaching, the pitching techniques, the training, all of those things, that's the curriculum. That's the instruction. The assessment is who has the highest score at the end of the game. Okay? So I just talked about that. Some important things to remember. State testing created by Smarter Balance will be aligned with Common Core, and it will replace NECAP in the next school year with everything except for science. The state has adopted, I already said that, since New Hampshire's been transitioning into Common Core, they started adapting in the 11-12 school year their NECAP questions to more closely align with Common Core. So they've started that adjustment, though the way they give the test will be very different. New Hampshire decided, it was New Hampshire's decision to adopt Common Core. It was not a mandate by the federal government. There was no funding attached to adopt Common Core. One of the requirements of the flexibility waiver that we received is that there must be a common statewide assessment. So remember No Child Left Behind? No Child Left Behind said by 2014, 100% of all students will be proficient on grade level in math and English language arts. If not, then there are some constraints that they put on you. So New Hampshire applied for what's called the flexibility waiver. Part of the requirement of that flexibility waiver is that everybody in the state, every student in the state has to take a common statewide assessment at grades 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, and 11. New Hampshire chose Smarter Balanced Assessment. So that's why we really don't have any flexibility in not doing it, because we said, if you give us this waiver, we will give everybody the same test statewide. If a district should say, no, I'm not going to do Smarter Balance, their funding could be in jeopardy. Right now, the state's still working with the federal government to determine exactly what that will be, and they don't know at this time. So right now, what they say is it could be in jeopardy. Another big question is, how much is Common Core going to cost? Well, what we've done for the past 3 years is we've used our current funding, and if we have to buy a new set of textbooks, we of course make sure that they are appropriate aligned to Common Core. If a teacher is going to a workshop, it may be aligned with Common Core. So we've utilized our existing resources to support our transition into Common Core. So we haven't, to the best of my knowledge, and I don't think anybody would disagree, we haven't expended additional funds because we're using Common Core. We've utilized existing funds and we've just used them in a different way. We don't go out and buy new textbooks because of Common Core, but when we're replacing textbooks, we certainly keep an eye on, yes, are they appropriately aligned with Common Core. So the Smarter Balanced Assessment will begin next year with everything except for science. We still will do science NECAP this year and likely next year, and the state is now determining what they're going to do with science after that. There is next generation science standards, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Of course, the big difference is that the next generation, the Common Core, is an adaptive test. It has to be taken on a computer. So when people say, how much does it cost? Test for test, they cost about the same, NECAP and Common Core. The big difference is that you have to have the technology and the resources in order to be able to provide Common Core. Rich Raymond has been tasked with reviewing the entire district to ensure that we have the proper technology that we need in order to effectively administer the exams next year. For districts that don't have the resources, the computer resources, the state has given 3 years. The first 3 years, they can use a paper and pencil, but they really say if you don't have to do that, don't, because it's going to make it very hard. Well, first of all, it wouldn't be an adaptive test, and second of all, it would be hard to score those against others, so there would be really no fair comparison. The Smarter Balance, we have the last 3 months of the year to take the test in those 12 weeks for math and English language arts. And the state is working on, because obviously if you give a 3rd grader in Hollis a reading test at the beginning of March, and you give somebody in Brookline, a student in Brookline grade 3, the same test at the beginning of June, that there's going to be huge differences. So they're working out a scheduling, and they will likely say, all 2nd grades or 3rd graders will take reading during these 2 weeks, and 3rd graders will take it during these 3 weeks. So before we have to actually administer the test, we're hoping that they will let us know exactly what's going to happen and when, and what the time constraints are per grade. So at this point, there's no way for either districts to opt out of the Smarter Balance, nor can parents opt out. If you don't want your child to take the Smarter Balance, that's not an option, other than keeping them out of school every time they have to take the test, which I don't think is a good thing to do either. Privacy of students. This has been one of the things that comes up over and over again about the privacy of our student data. We have RSAs, there's 2 up there. We have FERPA. FERPA did make some changes in 2011, which sort of lightened up their restrictions, but what they did was they really pushed it down to the state level, so states do determine about the data. There's the link there, so you can go look about. When we release student data, we can see, obviously, at the district level for people that have the authority to look at an individual student to see, their name, their test scores. Obviously, the teachers need it, the administration needs it, so that we can inform instruction based on that. But nobody else has access to the student data at the New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, when we push data out past that, all identifiable information is taken off of that, so there's no way they can tie a test score to a student. We would put out things like the student's grade, the student's district, whether it's a male or female, and just information like that, but there's no student ID number, there's no student name, there's no address, anything like that. And we will be reporting it out in Smarter Balance so that we have the ability to look at our students state to state and virtually nationwide for comparison. Also, our school boards, I know a couple of the school boards do have the JRA, the Students Record Access, and that talks about FERPA in there as well. So we do everything that we can to protect our student, the privacy of our student data. Nobody wants that data out there. So. But again, it's no different than what we currently do with NECAP. The pilot testing, last year they pilot tested, and really last year the pilot test was for the logistics of doing the test and the technology to make sure that it, to find out where the glitches were so that they could adjust those and make some recommendations. Actually, our CSDA participated in that pilot test. During this school year, there's field testing that's going on in a number of different states and districts, and that's really to look at the content of the Smarter Balance, and then review the results of that, and obviously make adjustments before the first official test is next year. So, and they'll continue to review the processes and the assessments because this assessment is so different than what we've ever done before. It might take a while. Just some differences between NECAP and Smarter Balance. NECAP is in October, Smarter Balance it will be at the end. Smarter Balance, we have a 12-week window. The cost of the actual test is approximately the same. Of course, the big difference is the technology that's used. And for Smarter Balance, right now the NECAP tests are kids, bubbling little things and write out their paragraphs. But in Smarter Balanced, they're going to, it will be more what they're accustomed to doing, because most often they're in school, they're on the computer, they're not bubbling things in and writing out and rewriting. So it will be more what they're accustomed to. Testing time is going to decrease most significantly in 7th and 8th grade, because there's an extra component right now in 7th and 8th grade. But overall, anywhere from 1 to 5 hours of test time will be. Drawbacks to the Smarter Balance, it's a different structure than students are accustomed to taking, so that might take them a while. Although it is, they're accustomed to doing NEWA at the elementary schools, and it's an adaptive test. So, maybe won't take as long for them to get up to speed. And like when you first start any testing, it'll take probably 3 years before we're going to have data that we really are going to be able to compare. Just like when we started our NECAP, it was 3 years before we could really say, okay, we're making progress or we're not making progress. We expect, because it is so different and so new, that initially probably our test scores will go down, but I think that everybody's will. That's just pretty much a common, there's a lot of change, it's a different test format, that it's likely that scores will decrease. But, we have to remember that it's only one test score one time a year. Our teachers, the students have multiple data points that we utilize to determine, is the student making progress or is the student not making progress. We certainly don't rely on one test a year. Generally speaking, the standardized test we use to sort of look at overall how the school's doing, how the district's doing. And then sometimes we will look at individual students, well, not sometimes, we always look at the individual students to see how they're doing and what standards, and to see is that NECAP testing matching up to what they're doing in school. And so it's, again, just another data point. And, all this talk about Common Core, we're still going back to our 4 main questions that we continue to ask about our students. What is it that we want them to know? How do we know when they know it? What do we do when they do? And what do we do when they don't? And really, we look at each individual student, the teachers, the principals, and Common Core is just another part of this, as we're going through. The focus is still on the students and what's best and right for students, and how do we help our students to achieve to the highest of their ability. Again, the work is done within our professional learning communities. Our teachers at each and every school have time each and every week that they're able to collaborate with one another, to work on their teams, to look at the assessments, to look at the student data, to look at their assignments, to look at their instruction, and work collaboratively together to really best meet the needs of all of our students. Educators, they work horizontally, which means across, 4th grade, Hollis and Brookline, they all will work together to ensure that they're addressing all of the needs of the students and equitably across, as well as vertically up and down, to make sure we're transitioning from kindergarten, 1st grade to 2nd grade to 3rd grade, from elementaries to middle to high schools. So it's really a huge cohesive group that works together to do it, make sure that Ms. Patty Flynn is going to come talk about some English language arts.
Good evening. Thank you for coming out tonight. I think I can answer any questions that you have about English language arts and some changes you might see in children's classrooms. Certainly at the end, if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Just as with our current curriculum and our current grade level expectations, the English and language arts standards include reading, especially literature, informational text, and foundational support students reading increasingly complex text as they move through the grades. And those texts are coming from a variety of different media. Some of the instructional shifts you may see in your child's classroom, students will be taught strategies that encourage them to interact with text at a deeper level. Students will be asked to cite evidence, give opinions, and make arguments as they respond to text and other forms of media. These responses often have students synthesizing information from a variety of sources, and writing in response to text will become more prevalent. In addressing some of these, one of the strategies that we had talked about in our earlier presentation was a strategy called close reading. And what close reading does is it encourages students to be using their metacognition strategies as they are reading a piece of text. So that means taking some notes, asking questions as they're reading, asking each other different questions about the text, so that when they are then asked to write a response to the text, they've actually gone a little bit deeper with the text. And I have for you some samples of some questions with the Smarter Balance assessment that will give you an idea of what exactly it is the students are expected to do. Another big piece is that second sentence, and that is students are now going to be asked not just to read a piece of text from a textbook or an article, but to use different kinds of media. You'll see in the questions with the Smarter Balance, students are being asked to use information from blogs, from websites, from videos. So again, it's taking all of those different mediums and asking the kids to synthesize information from a variety of sources. Writing is going to be taking center stage. You're going to see, and you should see, more writing across all disciplines, especially in the content areas. And within those content areas, again, going back to citing the evidence, giving opinions, and making arguments, students are going to be asked to do that increasingly as they move through the grades. So the first question I shared is from the Grade 4 Smarter Balance, and this meets the English Language Arts Literacy Standard to write informative, explanatory responses to examine a topic and convey information clearly. Again, this is a 4th grade question. So grade 4, in the video Animal Defenses, the pufferfish and the crab were both successful in protecting themselves from the same enemy, the sea otter. Do the pufferfish and the crab have the same type of defense? Include details from the video in your response. Now, prior to students being asked to answer that question, they are given a graphic organizer where they're expected to take notes on the video, and then they're allowed to use those notes in order to answer the question. And again, what you should notice is that students are asking, going beyond just the yes or no question to making sure that they are always including details from their responses. So in order to do that, students have to be taught how to do that. And those are some of the instructional shifts you may see in the classroom. You may see your children taking a piece of text and doing more work with it than simply just reading. Another question comes from the grade 6 Smarter Balance assessment, and the literacy strand here is to write arguments to support claims with clear reasons and relevant evidence. So it says, what evidence does the author of the article Growing Our Own School Lunch present that would best convince your teacher to allow students to grow plants in science class? Use details from the article to thoroughly support your answers. This question really requires that a student take the information that they've read and then make an opinion and then in turn write an argument. This is very different for our students. In a previous question, they may have just stopped with, how can you tell your teacher that you want to grow plants in science class? This one is forcing them to take more information from the different sources. And in the 6th grade response, there are actually 3 different pieces that they're getting information from before they get to this piece. So this is sort of an end of the test question, but all along they've been doing some reading and they're doing that sometimes under the guidance of the teacher. And that's another difference on the Smarter Balance assessment, is that most of the questions have some kind of teacher instruction tied to them before they're actually taking the test. Unlike NECAP, where we hand out the booklets, the kids sit down, they read a passage, they bubble in their answers, and they move on. So there is a little bit of a teaching component to the Smarter Balance assessment too, which we more successful and hopefully stronger readers and writers. So looking at the difference between informational text and literary text, one of the questions that we've been hearing a lot from parents is, what happens to our classic literature? What happens to our literary text? We're hearing that all the kids are ever going to read is informational text. If you really take some time to go through the standards, you see that it does still strike a balance between literary and informational text, and you can see that right from the beginning in a number of the streams. Classic literature, I hope, will always have a place in our curriculum. And again, going back to what Cindy talked about, remember that these are simply standards. We have control over the curriculum that we write, and we can include anything that we want. So if we want to add more literary text into our curriculum, we certainly can do that, so long as we're still meeting the standards that are on the board. Students are going to be asked to employ English language arts comprehension strategies across all disciplines. Especially at the secondary level, this has been a little bit of a shift for our teachers. We are asking them to employ more literacy strategies within their content areas, especially math, science, and social studies. That's been an exciting opportunity for our teachers. We've had lots of conversations during our PLCs on that, and the teachers are really creating some exciting activities that are weaving literacy into their assignments. And then remember, our goal is for students to make deeper text connections across all genres and disciplines. We really want them to have a solid, deep understanding of what it is that they're reading. I think Dot is up with our mathematics practices, so we introduce Dot Hall. She's our math department chair.
This is what's different in core curriculum from math. We're teaching the same thing at Hollis Brookline that we've always taught. Our standards are no different. We always had greater standards than the state required. We still have greater standards than the state requires. We're offering, right now, I would say a third of our kids take in their junior year more math than the state requires, and certainly in the senior year. We have 100 students right now, 120 students taking calculus. We have another 40 students taking AP statistics. So we have always, as a school district, gone over and above what's been required by the state standards. And certainly the Common Core, we are today over and above anything that the Common Core asks us to do. So I'm very comfortable that Common Core will not really have a direct effect on what your child is taught. Where the effect will come in is more how your child will be taught. And I have to think that it's a broader, it's a better way of pulling the students into the curriculum. What Cindy is passing out, I thought it was very interesting to pull two questions, one from NECAP and one from Smarter Balance for grade 4 and grade 11, to show you the difference. And because they're all passed out, I'll talk about it a little bit. And I think on the front I put the NECAP, and on the back I put the Smarter Balance. In both cases, the NECAP question is simply going to ask you a question. For instance, I want to know on the 4th grade NECAP, can that student read the graph, the statistics? And from that statistics, can they subtract? Well, yes, they can. But now look at the Smarter Balanced question. It's much more relevant to a skill that the child will need going into the future. Much more relevant. I'm going to take the exact same mathematical skill and really put it into a context that makes sense for something the child needs to do. It's not going to be counting snowmen, okay? And same thing for grade 11. We have a simple question. It's easy to... In grade 11, I simply am asking, and this is a NECAP question from this year, can a student look at a graph, a scatter plot, and say, as X is increasing, what is Y doing? So I read the information in English, and I then select one of those choices. And again, it's multiple choice, so the answer's there. They have a 25% chance of getting it right just by guessing. Can you tell me which is saying that? Now, look at the same skill that we're going to do now. Now it becomes real. This is a relevant question. smart classroom. It means in the classroom, I now have to have these conversations. I now have to show my students how to look at that, talk about it, collaborate with each other. We're back to the 4 C's of the 21st century learner: collaboration, communication, definitely critical thinking. The kneecap never really asked for critical thinking. These questions will. I'm training my students to think critically. I'm training them how to collaborate, how to communicate, how to problem solve. That was never a focus in math, or I should say 40 years ago when I started teaching math. It was not a focus. I gave them a list of skills and said, here you go, kids, do these skills. I don't do that anymore. In math now, we look at the whole world, at least here at Hollis Brookline, we look at the world as a function, and we start instruction and function from the very beginning. In 7th and 8th grade, they're talking about functions. In 9th grade, when I teach algebra, I'm going to teach them linear functions. That's the old y equals mx plus b, slope, y-intercept that you might remember. But I'm teaching it within the context. What does it mean? It's a constant rate of change. What does that mean to you? Where do you see that in the real world? It's not just, here's the equation, y equals mx plus b, please tell me the slope. Who cares? If you can't use that slope, it has no relevance to your life. It has no relevance to your life, guess what? You're not going to remember it. Because you've got to put all of your knowledge to something you already know. If you don't remember slope, I can't do more than that. So I've got to make it relevant to things that you already have. So, I think I need to make. These are the shifts that we're seeing. We want deeper understanding. We want coherence. We want it to connect together. We want dual intensity. We want the kids to have the skill, but we want the kids to be able to use the skill. And that's about all that I have.
I had a number of questions regarding science and why don't we have Common Core standards for science. Well, in fact, the next generation science standards have been developed. They have not been adopted yet. The state of New Hampshire may adopt them, may not adopt them. That remains to be seen yet. I did speak with Stan Frieda from the Department of Ed. He oversees the science, and what he said is that really the frameworks that we have now pretty well aligned to the next generation science standards. But again, like Common Core is to what we had prior, that the blended process blends those concepts with the process skills to prevent to create the standards that are really performance-based. And even with our kneecap now, we've more shifted to a more performance-based in the younger grades, that the students have to work together and collaborate to do the kneecap science. So that remains to be seen if it will be adopted. We have, as I said before, about 2 years left on the kneecap science, so this year and likely next year, and then the state will have to make a decision. The New Hampshire Science Teachers Association has a great website that gives a lot of information. They're doing a survey. You can go in and enter your thoughts on next generation science standards. They're collecting that. They're collaborating with the Department of Ed to make a determination. But for now, we will continue to administer the science kneecap. So I have a number of resources that I've put at the end, and believe me, I've looked at probably thousands of websites and different resources at this point. So what I've tried to do is glean down the resources to things that I feel are relevant and would be helpful and supportive. You go back so I can. The Common Core Initiative, you can go read, that has all of these standards, and that gets pretty complex. Grant Wiggins, I don't know if you're familiar with him, there's a great article that he put out. There's the Department of Ed, all of the Common Core is under, or right around that site where you can go to. Next. If you just think, like, I just really need a more global Common Core understanding, the New Hampshire Parenting Magazine put out a 3-part series. I think it was October, November, December, something like that. Fabulous. It really kind of boils it all down into clear, understandable, talks about the pros, talks about the cons, about the issues. I found that to be very, very helpful. The 21st Century Skills is really talks about all the skills that we need to ensure that our students have as they're graduating from high school and how that's integrated in with Common Core. These are all good. The Michigan Department of Education, this was the only really full-blown research that I could find on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. They did a nice job of doing some analysis on that, and they come out with, here's what's great about it, here's where we think there's going to be issues, here's where we think it's going to have to be tweaked. So that was really, really important and easy to understand. Next. Smarter Balanced frequently asked questions. That has a lot of the questions that I hear all the time. Protecting student data, there's a lot of good information on the New Hampshire DOE website about that. The New Hampshire Science Teachers Association, that's their website. College and career readiness, that's the standards. We talk about Common Core and having kids college and career ready. Well, the link there will bring you to the college and career ready standards as well. The full-blown flexibility waiver, if you want to go read all that. And the ELA crosswalk and the math crosswalk, the state of New Hampshire, the Department of Ed, took all of the Common Core standards and all of our current GSEs and GLEs, and they did a side-by-side crosswalk. So one column, here's the GLE, this column, here's the matching Common Core. So that is interesting as well. Center on Education Policy has some great stuff. Smarter Balanced Field Test, that tells you just what they did and how they're field testing it this day. And I would really encourage you to go take a practice test. You can go on, and it's just like your child sitting in the chair taking the Smarter Balance test. And you can see, I've taken several of them. You can, see when I took the 3rd grade one, I got those all right, so that was really nice. Then I went to the 11th grade math, and that was like, okay. But no, you can really see if you put in the right answer, it brings you up a notch. And if you bring in a wrong answer, it, makes it a little easier. A good example that I can think of real quickly is, there was a subtract, 365 from 5,023, and I put in the wrong answer. Well, the next question was a picture of a rectangle, and it, it showed the width was 10 and the height was 15, and it said what's the diameter of the rectangle. So it obviously knew I couldn't subtract, so then it gave me a visual with the numbers right there. So so it's adaptive like that to help kids go down through it, but it's really pretty fun. Facts and Fiction talks about the things that are out there and trying to balance the good stuff. The New Hampshire legislature, as Dr. Moody said, there's an awful lot of legislation that's going on in regards to Common Core, along with a number of other things in education. If you go to the New Hampshire School Board Association website there, and then each month they put out legislative bulletins. The one that I just looked at was from January 17th. You can click on that. When you really go there, you can click right on the January 17th. And you can go to the general web court site to enter the name of the bill. But when you go to the legislative bulletin, it gives you a whole list. Here's the bill, here's what it's about, and here's what's going on with it. If you want further information, go to the general court web. Make sure you put in the session as 2014 part, and it will tell you what's going on with that bill. So that's a great way to keep up with everything that's going on. And I think that's the end. I'll take some questions, and if you'll just say your question loud enough, we'll repeat it over the microphone.
Just a reminder that this is being live streamed and posted to the web, so there's some questions. I just wanted to ask you a question about how you compute the division of a rectangle.
Microphone. Microphone.
I'm a teacher, I can speak very loudly. She's looking at the 11th grade Smart Abounds question.
Yes. When you're taking this online or on the computer, something that I would do when I would do math problems, I remember in high school, like airline fee, I would write next to it like what it was. Like it may say in the word problem that it was Southwest. So I would write Southwest just so I could break apart the word problem. When they're taking this type of problem on it, do they have the luxury to be able to write on that, take notes and say, that's what I mean, so they don't have that ability, they would have scrapping. But you know what I'm saying? It would save them from time from having to redraw, that they could even just write on the Southwest, this is United, and I used to use those skills, that's why it was very difficult when I looked at that. Those were the things I was remembering.
I don't have an answer to that. I don't know how that's going.
I think one of the things that we don't know, and maybe the people who tried the trial test, so they know the answer, don't just let them answer it then.
So, Katie Fowler, principal of the Upper Elementary School in Hollis. I can say for the elementary schools, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, we already take adaptive computerized testing. And kids are interacting more and more on the screens and websites. They aren't using those types of skills. They're looking overall, and they might write a little scratch piece of note of paper, but they're not actually labeling things on their test booklets, even when they're looking at NECAP. When they're on the screen, when we're doing NWA testing, they are using different skills to make sure. And I don't think kids would name them differently now anymore. It would be airline P or airline Q. That would just be what we're trying to teach them. You can have lots of different names with letters and numbers. It doesn't have to be a certain name anymore. So I think there are different, I know what you're saying, Deb. I did those kinds of same things when I was a kid, but kids aren't thinking that way anymore. They really aren't. So, and we've seen it with our 3rd through 6th graders.
Question? Yes, in the back. If you could down here or...
You'll be able to hear me.
Okay, go for it.
From what I understand about Common Core, there's a cap on how much you can increase the standards. Is that true? Because I'm hearing it's 15% or some number of greater.
Well, Cindy, answer that for you.
What Common Core says is that at a minimum, you need to add an additional 15% on top of. They expect that at the bare minimum, the Common Core only covers 85%, and they leave that 15% for states can determine how they're going to use that themselves. As a district, we have the right to do whatever we want, to go as far above Common Core as we choose to. But the Common Core is really meant to be 85%, and each individual state determines the other 15%, but each district determines what they're going to do. There's, you know, it's a minimum. It's the floor, not the ceiling.
Thank you.
One of the issues that we have as school administrators is none of us have been through this yet. This is all regulation, it's paper, it's practice, it's web-based. We have not gone through any real iteration to look at it and say, well, this works and that doesn't work. So without that experience, it's hard for us to do it. But I want to go back and give you, if I can, just briefly a matrix in your head about how these decisions get made. Because I wish I really knew all of the answer, but this is how some of it gets made. The CCSSO, because of the acronym soup that we use here, are actually the superintendents of schools, the commissioners of education for all of the 50 states. That's the CCSSO. Those folks all meet, and they have discussions around contemporary educational issues. Sometimes those issues make it to Congress, for example, with 2001 with No Child Left Behind, which we've all lived with for all of that time. NCLB was a national mandate to the states that forced all of us to develop statewide assessments, in our case, the New Hampshire Educational Improvement and Assessment Program, so that we then could measure our students' progress against specific frameworks, and that data was reported back to, well, if you saw the Union Leader, it was always posted on the front page of the Union Leader, all of the results by districts and by schools across the state of New Hampshire. And so that took a bit of time to get all that done. The pressure for the end of NCLB was 2014. I want to take a look at Hollis Brookline and say this is a highly performing district, SAU. But what Cindy was talking about, no matter how high performing you were under No Child Left Behind, you had to be 10% better than that in the next 3-year period, or you would be considered a failing school. That was a very complex and very difficult issue for all of us to say, scratch our head. Say, we're all way up here already, and we have to increase yet another 10%, or somehow we're going to be penalized calling a failing school. So the mathematical system was that eventually everyone was going to be over the cliff in 2014. So the high-performing school district would say, well, what do you want us to do? We've raised our own standards. We do exactly as Dot said. We haven't diminished our standards this much at all. And we won't because of Common Core. That's not it. So that is going away, NCLB. CCSSO and others decided that we need now to think about national assessment. I am not saying I agree or I disagree. It doesn't matter. It's not up to me. So now the initiative is, let's have the mantra is, let us be competitive, this country, and our students across the global marketplace. And one of the ways of doing that was develop internationally benchmarked standards so that we probably could do better on the TIMS or the NAEP, which is National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is administered across the country and across the world. And by and large, we do okay. We certainly don't do spectacularly. When I say we, I mean the collective. This school district, this SAU, does very well. Very well on all of those measures. I don't see that the smart and balanced assessment is going to diminish that. Yes, those scores may look like they're depressed, but it's all going to be relative. We're all in the same boat here. That's what happened with NCLB and with the kneecap. Those are going away. What happens is when the U.S. Department of Education, either through pressure from the Congress or from the CCSSO or others, begins to promulgate these rules and regulations, hey, I got an idea, let's do Common Core. Let's do smarter balance. Because people wanted to escape the kneecap because they all knew they were headed in the same place. The consequences were state takeover of your local, literally, State Department of Education takeover of your local school. That is exactly where this was all headed. People said, well, that's crazy. Don't send this to the department. Scratch that. So it was crazy. It was an ill-conceived equation here that you're all going to fail no matter how hard you work, no matter how smart your kids are, no matter how hard your teachers work. And so they applied for a waiver that Cindy mentioned. The waiver said, well, if we don't have to comply with the tenets of NCLB, we'll do this. We'll participate in this smarter, balanced assessment. That worked its way down, and from us, it comes from the Department of Education. The Department of Education proposes to the state board, we'd like to do the Common Core, we'd like to do smarter balance, we'd like to do ED 306. By the way, those of you that really are interested, ED 306 was very controversial in this last session here because it's in the midst of being reauthorized with a bunch of changes that affect all of us in the room, particularly school boards, policy development, etc. I don't get really, as a superintendent, to really influence that outcome. You do. Your participation, your letters to your local legislators, your testimony before committees in Concord, that's what really counts. So you have to keep your eye on when hearings are coming up, what bills are being proposed, And what influence can you have on those things? Your local legislators are sitting in a big room, 1 second please, Val, in a big room like this, and then they hear from you, they take it seriously. Yes, sir. Go ahead and ask your question.
I'm concerned about my understanding that Common Core is being optional in SAU 41. I'm concerned about the origins and process used to develop Common Core. I'm just giving a little background on it first. It concerns me that the writings and discussions in developing the Common Core standards were sealed by confidentiality agreements and held in private. What was there to hide? Common Core was also developed by a task force whose membership included a majority of people who work at for-profit testing companies. I did see there was a teacher. Yes, there was one teacher out of 60 on that committee. The Common Core Validation Committee included two of the most prominent educational experts in the country, and this will get to my question, who are proponents of strong academic standards and assessments. You have Professor Sandra Stotsky from the University of Arkansas. She developed state standards in Texas as well as Massachusetts. Massachusetts has the best standards in the country and has served on several national curriculum boards. On the math side, Professor James Milgram from Stanford University, Professor Emeritus in Mathematics. He has had significant experience and success in developing state mathematics standards in big states like California, Michigan, Georgia, and Texas. He testified that he was the only content expert in mathematics on the validation committee. And along with many others on the validation committee for Common Core, Professor Stotsky and Professor Milgram both objected and did not approve the Common Core standards. Professor Stotsky said that the Common Core English standards are mediocre and it makes more students college ready, not by higher performance, but by reducing the standards and expectations. Professor Milgram stated that the core standards in mathematics have very low expectations. We heard a little bit of it here today. It's not, the standards only cover Algebra 1, some of geometry, and about half of the expectations in Algebra 2. This is Professor Milgram's conclusion, not mine. Way behind the rest of the world. These two experts have agreed to help states and school districts with standards development. Bill Cross in Alton, I believe, is taking advantage of that. With all of the talented educational professionals in SAU 41, and with the assistance of these educational experts, why don't we reject the Common Core standards? I know we need to keep a smarter balance for now, develop our own higher educational standards for our children in Hollis and Brookline. And before I give the mic back, I want to, if anybody's interested in signing a petition warrant article for the co-op, please see me after the meeting. I have a petition here to reject Common Core for the HB co-op and to develop our own standards using the experts. Thank you very much.
What was the question?
The question was, why don't we develop our own standards, not use Common Core? And there's 15% limitation. I disagree with Ms. Mack. 15% is the motion to change the Common Core standards. From what I've read, that's what you can't change the Common Core standards.
Okay.
So why can't we run?
Hold on 1 second. We are not, I said right from the beginning, this is not going to be a debate. I'd be happy to answer legitimate questions. That's a very long statement. I was cut off. So you can do your speech. So I'll try to answer your question. But first of all, you made some allegations that are untrue. So state the first part of your statement about this hidden agenda. November 5th, 2012, the minutes of the SAU 41 Governing Board, which are posted online. Excuse me. That's not relevant to my question. That's not what I said. Okay. I'm not going to stand here, no one else is here. Debate Professor Stotsky. I told you that at the beginning. What would you like me to answer?
My question is,
that is up. What did I say in the beginning? I'm not sure who's listening. The debate on whether Common Core continues rests with your school boards, not with John Moody. So if you want to do what you want to do, make your proposal, let your boards have the discussion, and they decide. I don't get to decide.
I'm not saying you do. See me after you're
It's getting hot. Just getting going.
So I have a couple of questions. One question I have is there a feedback loop? You said that the standards can change a little bit. for our school. So when teachers see something maybe that's missing, or they don't think it's appropriate developmentally for a child's age, is there a way for you to go back to the school board and say, we'd like to make these changes, these additions that we find, things that are missing that we'd like to teach?
As head of the math department, and I've been head for 8 or 9 years, I have always felt
Comfortable speaking with the administrators in my building and saying, this is a curriculum that is no longer working, or the way that we're presenting it is no longer working, or it's something that we don't need, it's being done in middle school, or our kids are coming in very well prepared. Our kids come in so well prepared from the middle school. Things like signed numbers. We were teaching, right from the beginning, like in Algebra 1, we would teach solving equations. We'd spend a month on that. We've now realized that's a waste of time. They come so well prepared solving equations that we've adjusted our curriculum to meet that. So now we have some extra time in Algebra 1, so then the question becomes, okay, what are we going to do? How can we add to the Algebra 1 curriculum? And this is where that conversation, the PLC that we have, happens again and again. And I want to say as a teacher, I've always gone to my administrators and gotten their approval, and yes, okay, let's go. So I've always felt comfortable doing that. Sure. What was that? I would agree with you. And I would also agree with you that the state standards ended at Algebra 2. There's no difference. I mean, I think there were 4 state standards that were not addressed by Common Core, and they were things that Hollis Brookline was doing already. So we're no different than what the standards were that were put out to us by the state of New Hampshire previous to Common Core. So that's why I feel really comfortable with that connection. And again, I feel very comfortable saying that we go so far and above that to prepare for engineering careers or to prepare students who are going into the humanities. That's why we brought AP Statistics into the course, because we had kids that weren't going to be engineers, and all we offered them was calculus. They didn't want calculus, and what would they need for a humanities major? AP Statistics. And so now not only were we able to offer another AP course, but we were also able to offer a statistics course that was very relevant to students that were high-achieving students, but maybe not an engineer-type student. So I've always, as I said, felt comfortable working with the curriculum and working with my administrators to adjust the curriculum to meet the needs of our kids.
I just have a quick follow-up just on what you said on the math. One of the reasons that I'm here is that when my daughter, who was in 7th grade, when she got her 8th grade schedule, she was in advanced math, and she actually had to redo the exact same class in 8th grade. And just because of these new shifting around in standards and whatnot. So, it resonates when I hear things like, kind of the dumbing down and pulling back, that resonates with me based on my experience with this.
I can speak to that better.
Okay.
Your child got in that one transitional year as we moved from our traditionals, kind of the sequencing that we use and the topics that we put in each grade, and then we moved to high school. And your child, I think, got taught in that 1 year bubble. Rob, I think you can speak to that better.
Yeah, so at the 7th and 8th grade level, we have 7th grade and 8th grade Common Core, which is the standards that have been set through CCSS. There's also a course called Compacted Common Core, which is basically a year and a half of content that is delivered in 7th grade. In 8th grade, you have the Common Core math, and then you have algebra. Now, in previous years at the middle school, some students had exposure to, a small number of students had exposure to geometry in the 8th grade. We have found, particularly with Common Core, that idea of going a lot deeper as opposed to superficial coverage. So really what you're seeing is, and at the beginning of the year, you're going to see that there's a lot of review of basic skills, but really having the emphasis of kids come out of the middle school really well prepared in algebra.
And then just one other comment, and then we'll move on. I think that my main concern, it may be echoed by some other people in this room, is local control. I think is very important on education decision. I think the more localized government can be in general, the better. So I think that what makes me really uncomfortable about this is that this is now nationalized, so it's on the national level. It's being dictated by the Department of Education. There is some funding based on this test, not all of it, but there's some kind of funding attached to it. And so, it sounds very logical, and it sounds, all these things, and, well, you'll still have local control. Maybe, but then, you think of other things where a lot of things made sense and how it was laid out, like, just the healthcare stuff. It's like, okay, you'll be able to keep your insurance and all this kind of stuff, right? And so you hear that, and then it isn't true, and it's national. And I don't want to get in that debate, but I think that's the uncomfortableness that I have, and maybe some other people have, is that once you nationalize education, it's like the tiny steps, but then 10 years from now, you realize you gave them the cancer, and now it's like really dumbed down to make sure it was
I couldn't agree with you more. Those decisions, however, are not mine. That was next. So I want to be sure.
First of all, I want to apologize for interrupting you. I didn't mean to do that. But, we listened to the presentation, and I wanted to fairly give the same amount of time for questions, and that was I apologize. So, I have lots of questions. However, I'm going to ask.
Can you say this? We've got 12 minutes. I'm going to go to the board meeting at 8 o'clock. We said 7:30, so if you could make your questions quick, they're welcome.
Sure. I'm just going to make a statement then. I really believe that this presentation should have happened 4 years ago, and it's a little late. So in the spirit of that statement being made, I would really appreciate it that if SAU 41 would make a commitment to making a date to have a debate. And because I think that we need to have a debate about this.
Thank you. I have a question with regard to slide number 27 of Ms. Matt's presentation. 27. Your first presentation. Yes, tonight. I just want to get out there so you can reference it. Do you have context to my question? 27. The last bullet there, you state that neither districts nor parents have the option to opt out. My question is specifically, am I correct in your understanding, my understanding, that you're saying that parents do not have the option for their children to opt out of the Smarter Balanced Assessment? I'm a little bit confused by that because I believe that there is, my understanding is that there's an RSA that enables parents to, in fact, opt their children out of such testing. And other states have parents have offered their children out of testing. So could you please clarify why are you saying that parents can't opt their kids out of testing?
I actually spoke to the board on the Department of Ed today and asked that exact question, and she informed me that there was no option for parents to opt out other than if it was a severe illness or something like that. There are reasons that would have to be validated, would have to get it approved by the state. Other than that, if you want to send me the RSA that you believe allows that, that would be great. I'll look it up. state of Montana.
I had two questions. One was, I understand for standards of standard testing. What is the process that goes into developing? The second question is, I know there's commissions, 49 states, where does New Hampshire fall? Does it need to bill doctors, bill?
The states all adopted it, well, in 2010 is when it came, and most states made their decision at that time. I'm not sure if there are any that have made that decision since then, but there were 48 states that were originally involved, and a couple of states did drop out. So that's to the second question. The first question was, as far as integrating the Common Core standards in with what we had previously, it's really been a 3-year transition period that our teachers have been working diligently to integrate that in a seamless manner.
Is that mostly done?
Yes, it is mostly done.
Cynthia's taking time to respond to some of my emails, and I really appreciate that so much. I'm going to make this as brief as I can. I've spent months learning about Common Core. It's very difficult to understand. It is not simple. It is an all-engulfing system of education. I have here in front of me, and I'll just make this short, and then I will ask my question. The official document of the Common Core people who put this together. On page 5, it states clearly that Common Core is a 5-step process. The first step is merely the standards, which are hotly debated. The second step means leveraging all of our resources so that Common Core completely penetrates curriculum, technology, etc., etc. I can read it to you. It's right here. And section 4, there's an entire section dedicated to the federal role for Common Core. It uses words like a new vision for state and federal partnership. It's also a set of living standards, which means it can change at any time. It says it in page 1.1 of the Common Core standards that they are living standards and they can change at any time. So it doesn't matter what is adopted, that can change at any time. We need to understand that quickly, briefly. I have read the minutes of the meeting. If you go to slide 14, that would be helpful. Because this is deja vu all over again. We're given a very short amount of time to deal with the most historic change of education reform in the history of our country. And we're given this much time to discuss it. A year and a half after the implementation began was when our board even got to vote on it. Okay, and you want to know what that vote involved? Because I read the minutes. The board was presented not with a full presentation, lots of debate, and robust discussion. The board, bless their hearts, was presented with a one-page document. It was later filled out to become about 40, which was a strategic plan. At the time it was presented to them, it turns out it was a one-page document. It had exactly one sentence about Common Core in it. That's the sentence. Slide 14. And that was the one sentence on Common Core. I read the minutes. There was no deep and penetrating discussion about how it would affect anything. There were a few technical questions here and there. You can read the minutes. And these poor board members were asked to vote to implement and adopt Common Core based on one sentence. Now, I have a quote. Okay, so my point is this, that Bill Beauregard asked a very important question in our meeting. He said, and you can look it up, are you folks comfortable with this document enough to make a vote on it? My question to you is, are we comfortable enough to have found out that by the time this meeting happened, they were already a year and a half into implementing the Common Core? That's in the minutes. And are you comfortable knowing that the board had exactly one sentence to look at? Because in Manchester, I was at that board meeting, and they had a big, robust debate about it. And guess what? They backed away. We deserve the same thing. We should have a big, open, robust dialogue about this. So my question to you is, are we comfortable with this? Is this sweeping educational reform, doesn't it not demand a deep, long, and lasting scrutiny? Are we comfortable with this?
I'm at a distinct disadvantage It's too, oh no, I'm too old to be cute. I'm at a disadvantage, I have to admit. I've been here for 6 months, so I'm trying to do as much background as I can to try to figure out how we got to where we are today. And I don't have all the answers to that. I don't think you want me to say, John, this is how it happened. I don't know. I've been in the business for now over 40 years. And these things come along, and unless the people, you the people, you the citizens, you have to keep your eyes and ears open. That's your responsibility. And if you want change, then you make the change. If you want your board, the SAU board, to have to sponsor a debate about it, then go ask them to have a debate about it. What we do is we do what we're asked to do. That's our job. I'm the chief executive officer. I direct the work of the people that work for SAU 41 and the member districts. And so we had our instructions. We followed our instructions. We are following our instructions. And until we're told differently, we'd be acting counter than what we've been asked to do. So you do it, if that's what you want. You're the citizens. You go to the polls. You elect people. You make budgets. Ask.
2 seconds. I just have a question. It seems like a lot of the speeches or discussion points tonight have put you guys on the defensive a bit, and because you've been working on this for a long time, and I actually have a lot of faith in the people in our school system. And I also thought that you were very excited that when you had also talked about how this way of teaching our kids to use critical thinking and all these other skills was going to be better, 21st century. So I am all for us learning more and having a debate and all of that. But I also would like to know if you guys have an opinion, because I hear a lot of people say, well, New York teachers don't like it, and they opted out. But what do New Hampshire teachers think? What do you guys think about whether or not this will work and whether it's any kind of an improvement? Because you should be able to tell us whether you think this has an effect on Hollis schools and our students.
I'll let them answer.
I personally think it's better. I'm not changing the skill base that I've ever taught kids. My kids are still learning about logarithms. They're still doing all of the math that we ever did. We're just not teaching it in isolation. I'm not sending a kid home with 25 logarithm problems to bring back the next day and never tell them where you're going to use logarithms. So if I have a choice in my classroom, and I do with my long blocks, I'm not going to have them sit there and do a worksheet. I'm going to sit there and have them collaborate on a problem maybe with, a pH balance. Give them a really rigorous question where they don't see the answer. They don't know the answer. They're going to have to talk to each other. They're going to have to communicate. They're going to have to think a little bit. And what I'm seeing right now, the hardest battle for all teachers is to make the kids think, to give them the skills where they just don't go, I don't know how to do this. And they really go, oh, wait a minute, I have lots of skills that I can bring to the table to think critically. That, I personally think, is our hardest challenge as a teacher. It's too easy to just give, really truly, it's really easy as a teacher to sit there and give them a worksheet and say, here, I'm going to teach, I call it monkey math. Here's monkey math, you do 20 of these and I'll give you an A. Hey, solve this problem, solve this critical thinking.
I just want to say one thing about Manchester. Reference was made to Manchester in Common Core, and they're going to develop their own high standards. Read all of it. The base of their standards is going to be Common Core. In fact, read the minutes and look at their decision was, we really have to stop. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, you have board members here, you have board members in the communities, you need to talk to them. Yes, I'm a little bit defensive, quite frankly. I told you that. Because we're trying to present to you what we're doing and how we got to where we were. It is not my job to become a political agent to decide whether or not board members, who are the decision makers, want to continue doing Common Core or not. What I want to do is to continue the high quality of instruction that we have become accustomed to and demand in the Hollis Brookline and the Brookline and Hollis school districts. You hear it from your professionals. Nothing is being diminished. This is a political argument that needs to be put in the political arena. We're doing everything that we can. And we're doing it effectively. Appreciate you coming. You can watch it again. We'll keep it up. For those of you who really want to watch it, the question page will still be up. So keep sending me questions. We'll keep getting you answers as best we can. So thank you very much.